This story contains themes of mystery, suspense, and psychological distress that some listeners may find unsettling. It started, as most things do these days, with a notification. Not a loud, urgent siren blast, but the quiet, almost polite ping of a forum update. Specifically, the Unsolved Mysteries and Cryptic Puzzles section of the old, forgotten internet forum Michael still occasionally frequented. He'd been a regular there in college, fueled by late-night energy drinks and a fascination with obscure riddles. Now at 27, working a soul-crushing tech job in downtown Chicago, it was mostly a nostalgic scroll, a digital dusty attic of forgotten passions. The new threat title hit him like a cold splash of water. Emily Chan missing. Emily Chan. Michael didn't know Emily Chan, not in the real world. But he knew her online avatar, her sharp wit, her almost legendary ability to crack the forum's hardest ciphers. She was a ghost, a username, but a prominent one in their niche corner of the web. Her last post, dated 3 days ago, was a cryptic string of hexadecimal code, followed by a single chilling phrase. "The game has begun." Now, "the game has begun" was a common enough phrase on a puzzle forum. But coupled with a missing person report, Michael felt a prickle of unease crawl up his spine. He clicked the thread. The initial post was from another longtime member, a guy named David Miller, who genuinely did know Emily. David's post was frantic, describing how Emily hadn't shown up for work, wasn't answering her phone, and her apartment door was unlocked with her wallet and keys still inside. The police, David wrote, were baffled. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, just an empty space where Emily used to be. The comments section was a mix of concern and speculation. Some users offered theories, others shared their condolences. But a few, the real hardcore Enigma hunters, started dissecting Emily's last post. The hex code, the phrase, "The game has begun." Michael leaned back in his worn office chair, the glow of his monitor reflecting in his glasses. He pulled up Emily's last post in a separate tab. The hex string looked like gibberish to most, but Michael's mind, still sharp despite years of corporate drudgery, recognized a pattern. It wasn't just random. It was too long for a simple hash, too complex for a standard encryption key. It looked like coordinates, or perhaps a very specific kind of digital address. He spent the next hour, ignoring his actual work, running the hex code through various decoders and solvers. Nothing. It wasn't standard. It wasn't ROT13 or base 64, or even a simple Caesar cipher. It was something else. Something custom. Then a thought struck him. Emily was obsessed with ARG's alternate reality games. Games that blurred the lines between digital puzzles and real-world interactions. What if "the game has begun" wasn't just a phrase but an actual game? And what if her hex code was the entry point? He remembered a particularly obscure ARG Emily had gushed about months ago, one that involved a deep dive into forgotten internet protocols and custom encryption methods. He dug through his old messages, through the forum archives. He found it. A link to a long-dead blog post about something called the Vanishing Act. The blog post itself was sparse, just a single paragraph hinting at a game of unparalleled intellectual challenge, where the stakes are not merely points, but a complete re-evaluation of reality. And a single active link, deepweb.darknet.game/initiation. Michael hesitated. He'd never ventured into the true deep web. He knew the risks, but the image of Emily's empty apartment, her inexplicable disappearance, gnawed at him. And that phrase, "the game where losing means disappearing." It was a common joke on the forum, a hyperbolic description for a particularly difficult puzzle. But what if, for Emily, it wasn't a joke anymore? He opened a secure browser, enabled his VPN, and typed the address. The page loaded slowly, a stark black screen with a single, white text box in the center. No logos, no instructions, no flashy graphics. Just the box. And above it, in a faint, almost invisible gray font, the single word, "key." Michael copied Emily's hexadecimal string and pasted it into the box. He held his breath, a strange mix of fear and exhilarating curiosity electrifying him. He pressed enter. The screen flickered. The black background dissolved into a complex, constantly shifting fractal pattern, mesmerizing and unsettling. In the center, new text appeared, glowing with an eerie green light. "Welcome, player. Your initiation is complete. The game has begun." Below that, a countdown timer started, ticking down from 72 hours. 3 days. And then the first challenge. Not a puzzle, not a cipher. A question. Name one thing that exists only when observed, and ceases to exist when observation stops. Michael stared at the screen, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This wasn't a game for casual players. This was something else entirely. The question itself was a philosophical riddle, a classic paradox. He knew the answer, or at least one widely accepted answer. But the implications? He typed his answer carefully. A quantum state. The screen shimmered again. The fractal pattern intensified. The green text changed. Correct. Your perception is keen. Now the first stage begins. You have 24 hours to complete your first task. Failure to comply will result in immediate disqualification. Disqualification means irrelevance. A new line of text appeared, a set of instructions. It wasn't a digital task. It was real world. Locate the abandoned subway station beneath the old Chicago Public Library. Accessible only through the forgotten maintenance tunnel at 41.8781 degrees north, 87.6298 degrees west. At precisely 3 a.m. tomorrow, a single unmarked envelope will be taped to the third pillar from the east end of the platform. Retrieve it. Do not be seen. Do not be followed. Your presence must be a whisper in the dark. Bring the contents back to this interface within 24 hours. Michael felt a cold dread seep into his bones. This was real. Emily's disappearance wasn't a coincidence. She had played this game, and now he was in it too. The coordinates were precise, leading to an actual historical location in Chicago, one he knew well from local urban legend forums, the ghost station, a relic of a bygone era, rumored to be haunted. His mind raced. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't some kids playing online. The precision, the secrecy, the mention of irrelevance as a consequence, it felt heavy, final. And 3 a.m., in an abandoned subway tunnel? That was beyond risky. That was insane. He looked at the countdown timer, diligently ticking away his 72 hours. He looked at the new 24-hour timer for the task. He looked at the empty chair in his small apartment, the late hour outside his window. He could just close the browser. He could walk away. Forget about Emily, forget about the game, pretend he never saw any of it. But the image of Emily's empty apartment flashed in his mind. The thought of her, sharp and brilliant, simply vanishing was unbearable. He wasn't a hero. He was just Michael, a guy who liked puzzles. But something in him, some stubborn spark of curiosity mixed with a growing sense of responsibility, refused to let it go. He had to know. He had to understand what happened to Emily. And to do that, he had to play. He pulled up a map of downtown Chicago, zooming in on the coordinates. The old library. The maintenance tunnel. He knew roughly where it would be. He'd need gear. A flashlight. Maybe a small toolkit. He'd need to be quiet. Invisible. His phone buzzed. A text from David Miller, Emily's friend. Any luck with that hex code? I'm going crazy here, Michael. The cops are giving up. They think she just left. Michael stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the reply button. He couldn't tell David. Not yet. David didn't understand the depth of this rabbit hole. He was still thinking of Emily in terms of police reports and missing persons. Michael was now thinking of her in terms of the game. He set his alarm for 2 a.m. He felt a shiver of fear, but beneath it, a strange, almost intoxicating thrill. He was no longer just scrolling through old forums. He was no longer just a spectator. He was in. He was a player. And the stakes felt terrifyingly, irrevocably real. He was about to step into the darkness, into a game where the rules were unknown. And the cost of losing, he suspected, was far more than just points. It was everything. The screen of Michael's phone pulsed, not with a triumphant fanfare, but with a stark, almost clinical display. The familiar app interface was gone, replaced by a single dark panel. In the center, a stark white font read, "Player initiated. Welcome to the Crucible." Below it, a single line appeared, then vanished, replaced by another. "Your first directive awaits. Seek the Whispering Archive. Shelf 7, Row 3. The Unseen Hand." Michael stared, his breath catching in his throat. The game. It wasn't just an app, not just a digital puzzle. It was reaching out, pulling him into the real world. The Whispering Archive? He'd never heard of it. A quick search on his laptop, fingers trembling slightly, brought up a single result. Oak Haven Public Library. Whispering Archive Branch. It was an old, obscure branch on the forgotten edge of town, known more for its dusty local history section than for actual patrons. It closed at 8 p.m. It was already past midnight. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. This wasn't a game he could play from his couch. This was an expedition, a trespass. The thought of breaking into a library, even an old, forgotten one, sent a cold shiver down his spine. But the alternative, the unspoken threat of what losing meant, felt infinitely worse. He felt an almost magnetic pull, a perverse curiosity warring with profound fear. He was in, wasn't he? He'd said yes. He dressed quickly, pulling on dark jeans and a hooded sweatshirt. He grabbed his phone, a small, powerful flashlight from his emergency kit, and his car keys. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of his apartment. He didn't tell anyone. Who would he tell? Hey, I just joined a mysterious online game that wants me to break into a library at midnight. And if I lose, I disappear? They'd think he was insane. Or worse, they'd try to stop him. And for some reason he couldn't quite articulate, he knew he couldn't be stopped. The drive was short but felt interminable. The city lights thinned, replaced by the hushed darkness of residential streets. The Whispering Archive Branch appeared. A squat brick building nestled between an overgrown park and a derelict gas station. It looked exactly as he'd imagined. Forgotten, silent, almost consumed by the shadows. No lights were on inside. The parking lot was empty save for his own car. He cut the engine, plunging the interior into an unnerving silence. He sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to turn back, to forget the app, to delete it and pretend this never happened. But he couldn't. The pull was too strong. The idea that he might actually disappear if he didn't play, it was a potent, terrifying motivator. He stepped out of the car, the cool night air prickling his skin. The building loomed, a dark monolith against the faint glow of the distant city. He pulled up the app on his phone. The dark panel was still there. As he approached the main entrance, a new line of text flickered onto the screen. Access granted. He tried the main door. Locked, of course. He circled the building, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Around the back, near a row of overgrown azaleas, he found it. A small, unassuming window, barely visible in the shadows, was slightly ajar. Not broken, not forced. Just open, as if waiting for him. His heart leaped into his throat. This wasn't just a challenge, it was an invitation. A chillingly precise one. Someone or something knew he was coming. Someone had opened that window. He pushed it open further, the old frame groaning faintly in protest. He hoisted himself up, a surge of adrenaline pushing him through the narrow opening. He landed softly on the dusty linoleum floor inside, his flashlight beam sweeping across rows of bookshelves shrouded in darkness. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and dust, a scent that usually comforted him but now felt suffocating. "Hello," he whispered, the sound swallowed immediately by the vast silence. No answer, just the frantic beat of his own pulse. He pulled up the app again. Shelf 7, row 3. The Unseen Hand. He navigated the labyrinthine aisles, his flashlight beam dancing across the spines of forgotten books. The shelves were tall, reaching almost to the ceiling, packed with volumes that looked untouched for decades. He found the local history section, and after a few tense minutes, located shelf 7. It was a short shelf, nestled between two taller ones, holding a collection of thin, worn books on local folklore and ghost stories. Row 3. He scanned the spines. The Whispering Woods, Legends of Oakhaven, beneath the old mill. And then he saw it. A slender, unassuming volume, almost hidden behind a larger book. Its title was simple, almost innocuous, Forgotten Tales of Oakhaven. It had no author listed, just a small faded symbol on the spine. A stylized hand with an eye in its palm. The Unseen Hand. Michael's breath hitched. This was it. He reached out, his fingers brushing the dusty cover. The book felt cold, almost ancient. He pulled it from the shelf. He opened it carefully, the brittle pages crackling softly. He flipped through the early pages, then the middle. There was no obvious marker, no dog-eared page. Just paragraph after paragraph of local legends, tales of lost settlers, strange lights, and unexplained vanishings. He was about to give up, thinking he'd missed something when his flashlight beam caught it. On page 117, A single word was subtly underlined in what looked like faded red ink. Convergence. It was almost imperceptible, a faint, thin line beneath the word, easily missed. But it was there. And as soon as his eyes registered it, his phone buzzed in his hand, startling him. He looked at the screen. The dark panel was still there, but now beneath the previous directive, a new message glowed. Convergence. Your next destination awaits. Coordinates received. Below the text, a set of GPS coordinates appeared, along with a specific time, 6:15 a.m. Michael quickly typed the coordinates into his phone's map app. It pointed to a location downtown, in a bustling commercial district. A coffee shop. A very specific coffee shop, one he knew well. The Daily Grind. It was a popular spot, usually packed with early morning commuters. He stared at the coordinates, then back at the word convergence in the old book. The game was moving fast, escalating quickly. From a secluded, forgotten library branch in the dead of night, to a busy coffee shop at dawn. The transition was jarring, unsettling. He was no longer just a digital player. He was an active participant, a pawn moving across a very real, very dangerous board. He carefully placed Forgotten Tales of Oakhaven back on shelf 7, row 3, exactly as he'd found it. He made his way back to the window, clambering out with more urgency than grace. He closed the window behind him, making sure it was as he'd found it. Slightly ajar, inviting. The thought of someone else following, someone else finding that window, sent a fresh wave of anxiety through him. Was he the only one playing? Or were there others, perhaps even now, navigating their own first directives, their own shadowy expeditions? Back in his car, he started the engine, the familiar rumble a welcome sound after the oppressive silence of the library. He drove away, the old brick building receding into the darkness. He had completed the first step. He hadn't disappeared yet, but the feeling of being watched, of being directed by an unseen force, clung to him like a shroud. The game had just begun, and Michael knew with chilling certainty that he had merely scratched the surface of its terrifying depths. The word convergence echoed in his mind, a promise or a warning he couldn't yet tell, but he knew with a cold dread that he was walking directly into it. He had to understand convergence. The word clung to him, a cold burr under his skin, refusing to be dislodged. It was the key he felt, the missing piece that connected the unsettling whispers of the game to the terrifying silence of the disappeared. Michael didn't sleep that night. He didn't even try. His apartment, usually a haven of quiet contemplation, felt like a pressure cooker, the walls closing in as he stared at his screen, a single relentless question burning in his mind. What is convergence? He started his search anew, abandoning the shallow surface of popular search engines. He delved into archived forums, obscure subreddits that hadn't seen activity in years, and the shadowy corners of the internet where information often went to die or to hide. He sifted through layers of conspiracy theories, urban legends, and outright nonsense, his eyes blurring from the relentless glow of the monitor. He was looking for a pattern, a recurring phrase, anything that echoed the chilling certainty he'd felt. Days bled into nights. Coffee became his lifeblood. His phone remained silent, a testament to how deeply he'd retreated from the outside world. His only companions were the flickering pixels and the growing stack of energy drink cans beside his desk. He felt a desperate, almost manic energy propelling him forward. Every dead end, every cryptic post that led nowhere, only fueled his resolve. He knew instinctively that he was close. Then, buried deep within a forgotten forum dedicated to unsolved disappearances from over a decade ago, he found it. A thread titled simply, "The Game." It was old, dusty with digital neglect, only a handful of replies. Most of the early posts were dismissive, labeling it as a creepypasta or an elaborate hoax. But one user with the handle Shadow_Seeker stood out. Shadow_Seeker's posts were different. They weren't just speculating. They were detailing experiences, observations, and a growing sense of dread. The early posts were cautious, describing strange coincidences and unsettling digital anomalies. It's like the game is bleeding into reality. One post read, timestamped 11 years ago. Saw a guy today downtown, wearing the exact same obscure symbol I saw in the game last night. Just a coincidence, right? Has to be. As Michael scrolled down, Shadow_Seeker's tone grew increasingly frantic. The rules are changing. another post warned, dated a few months later. The stakes are getting higher. They're talking about convergence now. Something about a final stage where the lines completely blur. I don't like it. Not one bit. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. This was the connection. He read on, his breath catching in his throat. Shadow_Seeker's penultimate post was a chilling descent into paranoia. I think I'm getting too close. The game, it knows I'm asking questions. My in-game avatar received a message today. Just one word. Observer. And then my real-life email, the one I only use for this forum, got an anonymous message. The same word. Observer. This isn't just a game anymore. It's watching. The final post from Shadow_Seeker was short, terse, and utterly terrifying. It was posted 3 days after the Observer message. They're talking about a location, a meeting point for the convergence. I think I've figured it out. I have to go. I have to see if it's real. If I don't post again, tell them it was real. And then nothing. Total silence. The thread ended there, a digital tombstone for Shadow_Seeker, who had vanished without a trace, just like so many others. Michael felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. This wasn't just some random poster. This was someone who had walked the same path, seen the same shadows, and had clearly been consumed by the very thing Michael was now chasing. Shadow_Seeker's disappearance wasn't a coincidence. It was a consequence. He immediately tried to find more information about Shadow_Seeker. The forum profile was minimal, just a username and a join date. No email, no links. But deep in the forum's archived About Us section, hidden in a defunct moderator list from years past, he found an old, seemingly discarded email address associated with the Shadow_Seeker account. It was a generic public email service, but it was a lead. Michael typed out a message, his fingers trembling slightly. He kept it brief, to the point, but loaded with keywords he hoped would resonate. Regarding the game and convergence. I believe I found your old posts. Are you still out there? I need answers. He didn't expect a reply. Not after all these years. He sent it anyway, a desperate message cast into the digital void. Days passed, mirroring the initial agonizing wait for the forum reply. No response. Michael's hope dwindled, replaced by a fresh wave of despair. Was Shadow_Seeker truly gone? Was he chasing a ghost, destined to follow the same path into oblivion? He decided to try another angle. He cross-referenced the email address with old social media breaches, forgotten data dumps, anything that might link it to a real name. It was a long shot, a needle in a haystack, but he was beyond conventional methods. After endless hours of digging through forgotten corners of the internet, he found a hit, an incredibly obscure, decade-old local news article about a coding competition winner. The name listed as the contact for the winning team? Sarah Miller. And the contact email address in the article matched the one tied to Shadow_Seeker. Sarah Miller. A real person. A person who had once been Shadow_Seeker, who had pursued the game, who had been close to convergence, and then vanished. Or had she? Michael found her on a professional networking site. Her profile was sparse, professional. No hint of the digital ghost she once was. She worked as a data analyst, her life seemingly normal, mundane even. He stared at her profile picture. A pleasant, unassuming woman with intelligent eyes. Was this the same person who had posted those terrified messages? Had she escaped? Or was her normalcy a carefully constructed facade? He drafted a new message even more carefully than the last. He couldn't just blurt out, "Are you Shadow_Seeker? And did a video game make you disappear?" He had to be subtle, yet direct enough to cut through the noise. "Ms. Miller," he began, "my name is Michael Vance. I'm investigating a series of unusual digital phenomena and disappearances that seem to be connected to an online game. Your name, or rather, an old online alias, came up in my research in connection with the term convergence. I believe you may have first-hand experience or knowledge that could be crucial. I understand this might sound strange, but I assure you, my intentions are purely to understand what's happening. I'm not affiliated with any organization, and I'm genuinely concerned for those affected." He hit send, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He waited, and waited. Another day passed. No reply. He slumped in his chair, the crushing weight of his solitary quest pressing down on him. He was alone in this, truly alone. Just as he was about to give up, to accept that Sarah Miller was either truly gone, or had successfully buried her past too deep to ever resurface, his phone buzzed. It wasn't an email. It was a message on an encrypted messaging app he barely used, an app he'd only set up for maximum privacy, and only gave the handle to a select few. The message was from an unknown number. It read, "Michael Vance, you're getting too close. Convergence isn't a game you win. It's a truth you discover. And you're about to be invited." A chill far colder than anything he'd felt before snaked its way down his spine. It wasn't from Sarah Miller. It wasn't from a forum. It was a direct, personal message. Whoever sent it knew his name, knew his private messaging handle, and knew he was investigating convergence. The game wasn't just bleeding into reality anymore. It was reaching out directly to him. He was no longer just an observer. He was now a player. And the rules he knew were about to change in a terrifying, irreversible way. The words echoed in Michael's mind, a cold, hard truth that settled deep in his gut. Player. The word felt like a brand, searing itself onto his identity. He stared at the screen, the forum now just a static image, a portal that had opened and swallowed him whole. His apartment, once a sanctuary of research and speculation, now felt like a cage. Every shadow seemed to deepen. Every creak of the old building's timbers sounded like an approaching threat. He was no longer just piecing together a puzzle from a safe distance. The puzzle had reached out, grabbed him by the throat, and pulled him into its twisted reality. He tried to breathe, but his lungs felt constricted. This wasn't some abstract online mystery anymore. This was real. Sarah, David, their disappearances, once distant tragedies, now loomed with an immediate personal horror. He was next unless he figured out how to play. Or, more terrifyingly, how to win. But what did winning even mean in a game where losing meant vanishing without a trace? The silence stretched, broken only by the frantic thumping of his own heart. Then a sharp, insistent vibration tore through the stillness. His phone. It wasn't a text, wasn't a call. It was a new notification, one he'd never seen before. He snatched it up, his fingers trembling. On the screen, a stark black icon pulsed. A stylized, interlocking symbol he recognized instantly from the Convergence forums. The game's emblem. He swallowed hard, a metallic taste coating his tongue, and tapped the icon. The screen went black for a moment, then illuminated with a minimalist interface. No splash screen, no user agreement, no settings. Just a single ominous line of text at the top, and beneath it, a countdown timer ticking down in precise, unforgiving seconds. Initiation protocol engaged. Below that, a new message. Objective, retrieve the cipher. Location, the old mill. Deadline, 4 hours 59 minutes and 58 seconds. The timer was just under 5 hours. Michael's blood ran cold. The old mill. He knew the place. An abandoned, decaying structure on the outskirts of town, rumored to be haunted, a relic of a bygone industrial era. He'd driven past it countless times, never imagining it would become a focal point in his grim investigation. He tried to close the app, but it refused. He tried to swipe it away, force quit it. Nothing. It clung to his phone's interface like a digital parasite. He navigated to his app list. It wasn't there under Convergence. It was simply there, embedded, untouchable. He tried to delete it from the home screen, but the option was grayed out. It was as if the app had become part of his phone's operating system, an unremovable extension of his digital life, or perhaps an extension of the game itself. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. This wasn't some elaborate troll or a sophisticated phishing scam. This was direct, personal, and undeniably real. He was no longer just tracking the ghost in the machine. The ghost had found him. He paced his small living room, running a hand through his hair, his mind racing. What if he just ignored it? What would happen when the timer hit 0? Would he simply vanish like Sarah and David? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through him. He pictured himself sitting in his apartment watching the final seconds tick away. Then nothing. Just an empty chair, a cold cup of coffee. No, he couldn't risk it. The fear of that unknown, that finality, was a far stronger motivator than any curiosity. He needed answers. He needed help. His fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up the old Convergence forum, frantically searching for any mention of initiation protocol, cipher, or the old mill. But the forum was quiet, almost dead. The last active posts were weeks, even months old, from people who had now likely disappeared. He tried to message a few of the more active members he remembered, people like Ghostwriter or Pixel Hunter. But their profiles were gone, their accounts deleted. He was truly alone in this. The countdown on his phone mocked him, each tick a hammer blow against his dwindling resolve. 4 hours and 45 minutes. He had to go. He had to follow the instructions, however terrifying they were. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to stay home, to lock the doors, to pretend this wasn't happening. But the faces of Sarah and David, their worried families, flashed in his mind. He wasn't just playing for himself anymore. He was playing for them, for answers, for a way to stop this madness. He grabbed his car keys, a flashlight, and his phone. The cold night air hit him like a physical blow as he stepped outside. The stars were out, indifferent to the silent terror unfolding beneath them. The drive to the old mill was a blur. He found himself gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles ached. Each turn brought him closer to the decaying structure, a looming silhouette against the pale moon. The mill stood isolated, surrounded by overgrown fields and skeletal trees. Its windows were like empty eyesores, reflecting nothing but the oppressive darkness. A rusted chain-link fence, long since breached in several places, surrounded the perimeter. Michael parked his car a discreet distance away, switching off the headlights and engine, plunging himself into near-total darkness. The only sound was the wind, whistling through the broken panes of glass, a mournful, haunting cry. He got out, the gravel crunching under his boots, amplifying every sound in the unsettling quiet. He pulled out his phone, the Convergence app still glowing on the screen, the timer relentlessly counting down. He switched on his flashlight, its beam cutting a shaky path through the gloom. The main entrance, a gaping maw of rotting wood, welcomed him into the mill's cavernous interior. The air inside was thick with dust, mildew, and the metallic tang of decay. Broken machinery lay scattered like the bones of some forgotten beast, covered in cobwebs and grime. Shadows danced with every flicker of his flashlight, transforming mundane objects into monstrous shapes. "Objective, retrieve the cipher," he muttered to himself, his voice barely a whisper in the vast space. What was he even looking for? A piece of paper? A digital device? A riddle? The game offered no further clues, no hints, just an instruction and a deadline. He moved cautiously, his senses on high alert, his heart hammering against his ribs. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant rustle made him jump. He swept his flashlight beam across rusted gears, empty hoppers, and crumbling brick walls. Nothing. He ascended a rickety wooden staircase to the second floor, the steps groaning ominously beneath his weight. Dust motes danced in the flashlight's beam, like tiny ethereal spirits. Up here, the machinery was even more dilapidated, tangled wires hanging like desiccated vines. He pushed open a heavy warped door, revealing a small office. A desk, overturned chairs, scattered papers, all decaying under a thick layer of dust. He started sifting through the debris, his movements slow and deliberate. Under a pile of water-damaged blueprints he found something. Not a cipher, but a small leather-bound journal. It looked old, its pages yellowed and brittle. He opened it carefully. It wasn't the mill's ledger, but a personal diary. The handwriting was neat, meticulous, and unfamiliar. The entries dated back almost a decade. As he flipped through the pages, a name jumped out at him. Elias Thorne. The journal belonged to the mill's last foreman, a man who had apparently been obsessed with local folklore and strange occurrences. One entry dated 5 years ago caught his eye. It spoke of a peculiar signal detected in the mill, a recurring electromagnetic anomaly that seemed to follow a pattern, almost like a code. Thorne had believed it was a message, perhaps from another dimension, or an ancient, forgotten intelligence. He'd even built a device, a resonator, to try and interpret it. Michael's phone vibrated again, not with a new notification, but with a subtle hum that seemed to emanate directly from the app. The screen flashed and a new element appeared on the minimalist interface. A small pulsing circle, like a radar blip, accompanied by a faint, high-pitched whine that only he seemed to hear. It was a proximity sensor. It was guiding him. He followed the signal, moving deeper into the office, his flashlight beam sweeping across the walls. The pulsing circle on his phone grew stronger, the whine more insistent. It led him to a section of the wall where the plaster was cracked and peeling, revealing the bare brick beneath. The signal was strongest here. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the cold, rough surface. And then he felt it. A faint indentation, a loose brick. He pressed it, and with a soft click, a small section of the wall recessed, revealing a shallow alcove. Inside, nestled on a dusty shelf, was a strange device. It was a complex contraption of brass, copper wire, and glowing crystals, clearly Thorne's resonator. This had to be the cipher. He reached for it, his heart pounding with a mix of triumph and dread. As his fingers closed around the cold metal, a sudden guttural clatter echoed from the floor below. It was too loud to be the wind, too deliberate to be a falling object. Someone else was here. Michael froze, the resonator clutched in his hand. His flashlight beam darted to the doorway, then to the gaping hole in the floor that offered a view of the ground level. A figure, silhouetted against the faint moonlight filtering through a broken window, was moving stealthily among the machinery. It wasn't a hallucination. He wasn't alone. "Hello," Michael called out, his voice betraying a tremor he couldn't hide. The figure stopped, its head tilting slightly as if listening. Then slowly it turned. It wasn't a menacing, hulking shape. It was slender, almost delicate. And as the figure stepped into a sliver of moonlight, Michael saw her face. A young woman about his age with wide, wary eyes that reflected his own fear. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore practical, dark clothing. In her hand, she held a small, antique-looking compass that glowed with a faint internal light. "You found it," she said, her voice a hushed whisper betraying no surprise. "I was wondering who else got the message for Thorne's trinket." She looked at him, then at the device in his hand. "So you're a player too?" Her eyes narrowed. "Or are you one of the hunters?" Michael stared, dumbfounded. "Another player. Here. Now." The game wasn't just reaching out to him. It was actively pitting players against each other, or perhaps bringing them together. He gripped the resonator tighter. "My name's Michael," he managed, his voice still shaky. "And no, I'm not a hunter. I just got pulled into this. I'm looking for answers." "What do you mean?" "Thorne's trinket." The woman lowered her compass slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Jessica. And this trinket is the first step. The cipher, as they call it. Thorne believed it could translate the signals. The game wants us to activate it." She paused, then took a step closer. "But it's not just about activating it. It's about what happens after." Michael felt a fresh wave of dread wash over him. Just when he thought he had a grasp of the immediate objective, Jessica's words hinted at a deeper, more sinister layer. He looked at the resonator in his hand, then back at Jessica, her face pale in the dim light. The game had just become infinitely more complicated. He wasn't just a player anymore. He was an unwilling participant in a deadly alliance, thrust into a world where every move was watched, every objective a trap, and every victory merely a prelude to a greater, more terrifying challenge. The countdown on his phone, still ticking, felt less like a deadline and more like a fuse, and the explosion he knew was imminent. Michael's mind was a battlefield. Every shadow held a watcher, every silence phone a potential informant. The game wasn't just observing him. It was living inside his head, twisting his perception of reality. The countdown on his screen had become a pulsing digital heartbeat, each tick a hammer blow against his sanity. He felt the fuse shortening, the inevitable explosion drawing closer, and he was strapped to the device. He hadn't slept properly in days. The money, once a lure, now felt like blood money, a heavy cloak of guilt. Alex. His friend was gone, swallowed by this digital maw. And Michael was still here, still playing, still breathing, a survivor by unwilling participation. He gripped the phone, his knuckles white. He had to find Alex. That was the only objective that truly mattered now. Then a vibration. Not the countdown, but a new notification. His heart hammered against his ribs. He braced himself, the screen glowing ominously in the dim light of his apartment. The message was stark, devoid of any pleasantries. Your next task awaits at 42 Elmwood Lane. Access the property and retrieve the designated item. You have until 3 a.m. Failure to comply will result in the forfeiture of all assets and permanent removal from the game. Do not attempt to involve external authorities. Permanent removal. The chilling euphemism for disappearance. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise the game had already delivered on with Alex. Michael felt a cold dread seep into his bones. 42 Elmwood Lane. He'd never heard of it. He quickly typed the address into his browser. The results were sparse, mostly old real estate listings and a few local forum posts. An abandoned property, a dilapidated house on the very edge of town, notorious for being a local haunt, a place where teenagers dared each other to spend a night. A place whispered to have a history of strange occurrences of people simply leaving, the kind of place perfect for the game's dark theatrics. And the deadline was tight. It was already past midnight. He moved on autopilot, grabbing his car keys, a small flashlight, and a worn baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Every street he drove down felt unfamiliar, every passing car a potential tale. His paranoia was a living thing, a shadow stretching and shrinking in his peripheral vision. The city lights faded behind him, replaced by the oppressive darkness of the rural road leading to Elmwood Lane. The house loomed out of the darkness, a skeletal silhouette against the bruised purple sky. Overgrown weeds clawed at what remained of a porch, and shattered windows stared out like empty eye sockets. A thick, oppressive silence hung in the air, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the frantic beat of his own heart. He cut the engine, plunging himself into complete darkness, then fumbled for his flashlight. He approached the house cautiously, each crunch of gravel under his sneakers echoing unnaturally loud. The front door hung ajar, a gaping maw inviting him into the unknown. He pushed it open further, the rusty hinges groaning in protest, a sound that seemed to shriek through the night. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting long, distorted shadows that danced as he moved his flashlight beam. Debris littered the floor. Shattered glass, fallen plaster, the skeletal remains of what might have once been furniture. This wasn't just abandoned. It was ravaged, as if something violent had occurred here. "Retrieve the designated item," the message had said. But what was it? He began his search, moving from room to room, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The kitchen was a wreck of broken cabinets and ancient, rusted appliances. The living room held a single, overturned armchair, its stuffing spilling out like entrails. Upstairs, the bedrooms were equally desolate, stripped of anything personal, leaving only the ghosts of former lives. He felt the prickle of eyes on him, a constant, unsettling sensation. He spun around several times, flashlight sweeping the corners, the ceiling, the blackness beyond the windows. Nothing. Just the house breathing its cold, musty breath. He was alone, yet utterly exposed. The countdown on his phone was a merciless reminder, ticking away his precious minutes. He had to be missing something. The designated item wouldn't just be lying in plain sight. This was the game. It was never that simple. He moved into what might have been a study or library, judging by the empty bookshelves lining one wall. Here, the floorboards seemed a little less stable. He knelt, shining his light along the warped wood, tapping gently. One board near the fireplace felt loose. He pried it up with the edge of his flashlight. Beneath it, nestled in a shallow cavity, was a small metal box. It was sleek, dark, and surprisingly heavy, with no visible seams or locks. Its surface was cold to the touch, and it hummed faintly, a barely perceptible vibration that sent a shiver down his spine. This had to be it. The designated item. He carefully lifted the box, a strange weight settling in his palm. It felt ancient, yet impossibly advanced. As his fingers brushed against the cavity where the box had rested, he felt something else. Piece of fabric. He pulled it out and his breath hitched. It was a baseball cap, worn, faded, with the distinctive embroidered logo of a local minor league team. Alex's cap, the one he always wore, the one Michael had teased him about for years. It was unmistakable. Alex had been here, or at least his cap had. A wave of nausea washed over him, mixed with a surge of desperate hope. Alex wasn't just gone. He was here, or he had been. Was this a clue? A message? Or just another cruel trick from the game, designed to twist the knife? He clutched the cap, his mind racing. The game wanted him to retrieve the box, but it had also led him directly to a trace of Alex. Was Alex still alive? Was he trapped somewhere in this house? He called out, his voice hoarse, "Alex? Are you here?" The only reply was the mournful creak of the house settling. He searched with renewed urgency, his eyes scanning every inch of the room, every shadow, every hidden corner. He checked behind the bookshelves, inside the fireplace, under the remaining debris. Nothing. No more signs of Alex. Just the chilling confirmation that his friend had walked these very floors. been in this very house before vanishing. He ran his fingers over the metal box again, trying to find a latch, a button, anything, but it was seamless. As he was about to give up and just take the box, he noticed a faint inscription on its underside, barely visible in the weak beam of his flashlight. The key opens what you fear most. A key? What key? He hadn't found a key. Was it hidden somewhere else in the house? Or was it metaphorical? He slumped against the wall, the heavy metal box and Alex's cap in his hands, the weight of the situation crushing him. The countdown continued its relentless march. He had minutes left. He couldn't stay here, not if he wanted to avoid permanent removal. He had the item. He had the chilling proof that Alex had been here. He had the cryptic message about a key. It was enough. He had to get out. As he turned to leave the study, a sudden sharp thump echoed from the floor above, directly over his head. It sounded like something heavy had fallen, or been deliberately dropped. He froze, every muscle tensing. He wasn't alone. He couldn't be alone. He slowly raised his flashlight, aiming it at the ceiling, then towards the doorway. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. His heart pounded. He considered going upstairs, but the countdown screamed at him. He had completed the objective. He had the box. He had Alex's cap. He needed to get out. Now. He sprinted through the decaying house, past the broken windows and the gaping front door, not daring to look back. He scrambled into his car, fumbling with the keys, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped them. The engine roared to life, a welcome sound in the oppressive quiet. He sped away from 42 Elmwood Lane, the ominous silhouette shrinking in his rearview mirror. He was halfway back to his apartment, the adrenaline slowly receding, when his phone vibrated again. A new message. Not from the game interface this time. It was from an unknown number, a string of digits he didn't recognize. He hesitated, then opened it. The message was brief, chillingly personal, and utterly devoid of context. "You have picked up the wrong key, Michael. Now you are the lock." He slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly on the deserted road. The metal box sat heavy on the passenger seat, innocuous yet menacing. The key. The message. "You are the lock." His blood ran cold. He wasn't just a player anymore. He was the next objective. He was the next prize. And the game, he realized with a sickening certainty, had just found a way to make him truly disappear, not just from the game but from himself. The explosion, he now understood, wasn't just imminent. It had already begun. The realization hit Michael like a physical blow. Not an immediate impact, but a slow, crushing pressure that began in his chest and radiated outwards, chilling him to the bone. He was the next prize. And the game, he realized with a sickening certainty, had just found a way to make him truly disappear, not just from the game but from himself. The explosion, he now understood, wasn't just imminent. It had already begun. It wasn't a bang but a whisper, a silent, insidious unraveling of the fabric of his own mind. He felt it not as a sudden loss, but as a growing void, a subtle shift in the landscape of his memories. A memory would flicker, a detail would feel off. It was like trying to grasp smoke. He reached for a thought, a specific moment from his past, and found it hazy, indistinct, as if viewed through frosted glass. This wasn't just fear. This was an existential terror. He wasn't just losing his life, he was losing Michael. He stumbled back from the computer, the screen a mocking mirror of his own growing panic. His apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set, every object a potential prop in this horrifying play. He had to fight it. He had to find something, anything that proved he was still himself, that his memories were real. He began to frantically search, his hands trembling as he tore through drawers, rifled through old photo albums, desperate for an anchor. He stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, scrutinizing his own eyes. Were they the same? Did they hold the same history, the same spark? He felt disconnected, observing himself from a distance, as if his consciousness was already beginning its slow, terrifying retreat. His gaze fell upon his bookshelf, a familiar collection of worn paperbacks and academic texts. He walked over, his steps heavy, and pulled out a copy of Cosmos by Carl Sagan, a book he'd owned since his college days. He remembered the feeling of awe, the hours spent poring over its pages, dreaming of the stars. He opened it to a random page, his eyes scanning the familiar text. Then he froze. A passage near the bottom of page 117 was highlighted in bright yellow. A sentence about the vastness of space and the insignificance of individual existence. But it wasn't the highlighting that sent a fresh wave of nausea through him. It was the margin. Scrawled neatly in black ink, in what looked undeniably like his own handwriting, was a single cryptic note. "The void knows your name." Michael stared, his breath catching in his throat. He had never written in his books, especially not in a cherished copy like this. He remembered, distinctly, his aversion to defacing books. Yet, there it was, a testament to a memory he simply did not possess. He ran his finger over the ink, tracing the familiar loops and angles of his own script. It felt alien, a forgery of his own hand, yet undeniably his. He flipped through more pages, his heart hammering against his ribs. Nothing else. Just that one chilling note. It was a surgical strike, a precise incision into the core of his identity. The game wasn't just taking bodies, it was planting seeds of doubt, weaving false realities, making him question the very foundation of his being. The explosion wasn't a sudden cataclysm. It was a slow, controlled demolition of his mind. He slammed the book shut, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the silent apartment. He felt a desperate urge to scream, to lash out, but what good would it do? Who would hear him? Who would believe him? He needed answers. He needed to understand how this was happening and, more importantly, why. He returned to his computer, his hands flying across the keyboard, searching for any mention of memory manipulation, identity theft, anything that resonated with his terrifying experience. He delved deeper into the dark corners of the internet, past the surface web, past the forums he'd already scoured. He searched for phrases like false memories planted, identity erasure game, cognition alteration. Hours blurred into a frantic haze of clicking and reading. He found fringe theories, conspiracy ramblings, and speculative fiction, but nothing concrete, nothing that explained the insidious precision of what he was experiencing. Just as despair threatened to swallow him whole, a new result popped up on a particularly obscure forum, tucked away behind layers of proxy servers and encrypted gateways. The title was simple, stark: The Echo Chamber. He clicked, his pulse quickening. The page loaded slowly, revealing a minimalist interface. No chatter, no threads, just a single scrolling feed of what appeared to be anonymous posts, each one a cryptic fragment. Most were unintelligible, random strings of numbers or symbols. But then one caught his eye. It read, "They don't take your life, they take yourself. The prize is the empty vessel." Michael's blood ran cold. This wasn't some random conspiracy theory. This was too close. He scrolled further, his eyes darting across the screen. Another post, timestamped just a few hours ago. "The game is changing. The hunters become the hunted. The vessel is being prepared." And then, a direct message notification flashed in the corner of his screen, appearing from within the forum itself, not from an external email or chat client. It was from a user named Cypher_Scribe. He hesitated, a fresh wave of paranoia washing over him. Was this another trap? Another layer of the game? But the alternative was to descend further into the abyss of his own unraveling mind. He had no choice. He clicked the message. The text was brief, chillingly precise. "Michael, I know about the book. I know about the void. You are not alone. And you are running out of time. They are modifying you, preparing you. You need to understand what you're becoming before it's too late. Meet me. Tonight. Abandoned warehouse, old industrial district, near the river. Midnight. Come alone. Don't tell anyone. Don't bring anything traceable. And above all, don't trust what you think you remember." The message ended abruptly. Michael stared at the screen, his mind racing. This was it. A direct line. A potential ally. Or a very elaborate, very cruel trap. The details were too specific, too personal. Asterisk the book. The void. Asterisk, how could anyone know that? Unless they were part of the game. Or perhaps they were fighting it. His internal compass spun wildly. Every instinct screamed danger, but a deeper, more primal part of him recognized this as his only chance. He had to know. He had to understand what they were doing to him, what he was becoming. The idea of an empty vessel sent shivers down his spine. Was he being hollowed out, his identity replaced with something else? He looked at the clock. It was already 9 p.m. 3 hours. 3 hours until a rendezvous that could either offer salvation or plunge him deeper into this nightmare. He thought about calling the police again, but what would he say? Someone is making me doubt my memories, and they wrote in my book, and now a mysterious person wants to meet me at a warehouse? He'd be laughed out of the station, or worse, deemed unstable. The game had truly isolated him. He began to prepare, moving with a grim determination. He grabbed a small backpack, stuffing in a bottle of water, a multi-tool, and a fully charged burner phone he'd bought months ago on a whim, never expecting to use it. He wore dark clothing, sturdy shoes. He tried to clear his mind, to focus on the immediate task, but the chilling words echoed. Don't trust what you think you remember. He felt a profound sense of loneliness, a terrifying isolation. Every memory now felt suspect. Every familiar object in his apartment seemed to mock him with its potential for deception. He was adrift in a sea of uncertainty, his own mind the treacherous current. As he stepped out of his apartment building and into the cool night air, the city lights blurred around him. He hailed a cab, giving a generic address a few blocks from the old industrial district. He would walk the rest of the way, making sure he wasn't followed, or at least making it harder to be followed. His heart pounded with a mixture of dread and a desperate, flickering hope. He was walking into the unknown, chasing a ghost, a whisper in the digital void. But he knew with a certainty that cut through his fear, that he couldn't stay where he was. The explosion had already begun, and if he didn't fight back, if he didn't find the source of this insidious unraveling, the Michael he knew would soon disappear, leaving behind nothing but an empty vessel, a prize for a game he still barely understood. The game wasn't just about losing, it was about becoming something else entirely, and the thought of what that something else might be was a terror far greater than any disappearance. He was heading into the heart of the storm, knowing that this meeting, this mysterious cipher underscribe, was his last desperate gamble. He was heading into the heart of the storm, knowing that this meeting, this mysterious cipher underscribe, was his last desperate gamble. The address cipher underscribe had provided led Michael to a forgotten corner of the city, a district of crumbling brick buildings and neon signs that had long ago faded into dull hums. The place itself was an anachronism, a dimly lit internet cafe called the Bite Haven. Dust motes danced in the solitary shaft of light slicing through the grime-streaked window, illuminating rows of ancient, bulky monitors that looked like relics from another era. The air hung heavy with the faint scent of stale coffee and ozone. Michael pushed open the creaking glass door, the bell above chiming a mournful, almost forgotten tune. Only a handful of patrons were scattered amongst the workstations, their faces illuminated by the pale glow of their screens, lost in digital worlds. None of them looked like the shadowy, omniscient hacker he had imagined. Michael scanned the room, his heart thudding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. A figure sat hunched at a back booth, half obscured by a potted, dying fern. It was an older woman, perhaps in her late 50s, her graying hair pulled back into a severe bun. She wore a simple, faded denim jacket and spectacles perched on the end of her nose, her gaze fixed on a worn paperback. She looked more like a retired librarian than the key to unlocking a terrifying digital conspiracy. He approached cautiously. Cipher underscribe, Michael whispered, his voice barely audible above the low drone of the computers. The woman slowly lowered her book, her eyes, sharp and surprisingly intense, met his. Michael, I presume? Her voice was soft, raspy, as if unused to prolonged conversation. Take a seat. Michael slid into the booth opposite her, the worn upholstery sighing beneath him. He noticed the tremor in her hands as she placed her book on the table, a copy of Frankenstein. A fitting choice, he thought, given the circumstances. You're not what I expected, Michael admitted, the words escaping before he could stop them. A faint, humorless smile touched her lips. Few people are. Expectations are dangerous in this game. I'm Evelyn. Evelyn, Michael repeated, testing the name. It felt ordinary, too normal for the weight of the information she supposedly held. You said you could help me understand what's happening. The disappearances. The game. Evelyn leaned forward, her gaze sweeping the room before settling back on Michael, a silent warning in her eyes. The game is a misdirection, Michael. A sophisticated lure. It's not about winning or losing points. It's about data. About patterns. About you. Michael felt a chill crawl up his spine. Me? Why me? Because you exhibit a unique blend of traits. Resilience. Adaptability. a particular problem-solving methodology that deviates from predictable paths. You're an outlier, and outliers are either valuable or dangerous. She paused, taking a slow, deliberate breath. The disappearances, as you call them, are not what you think. Nobody truly disappears in the traditional sense. They are not killed. They are repurposed. The word hung in the air, heavy and disturbing. Repurposed? What does that mean? It means their lives are meticulously erased from public record, their identities systematically dismantled. Their skills, their intellect, their very essence, are then funneled into a larger, unseen objective. They become assets, tools. They are not gone. They are merely reassigned, recalibrated. Their free will, their memories of their old lives, are meticulously edited. Michael stared at her, horrified. This was far worse than he had imagined. Far worse than death. You mean, they're brainwashed? Controlled? Evelyn nodded slowly. In essence, imagine a highly advanced form of psychological conditioning, combined with cutting-edge neurolinguistic programming. Their minds are rewired, their past rewritten. They are given new directives, new loyalties. They cease to be who they were. They become extensions of a collective will. A collective will? Michael pressed, his voice tight. Who is behind this? Who are these architects? They are a shadowy organization, Michael, operating beneath the surface of global power structures. They don't seek wealth or political office in the conventional sense. They seek influence, control. They believe humanity is too chaotic, too inefficient, too prone to self-destruction. They envision a perfectly ordered world, guided by their unseen hand. And to achieve that, they need the best minds, the most adaptable individuals. Like you. But why me? Michael repeated, the thought of his own identity being stripped away, repurposed, making his stomach churn. Your persistence, your refusal to give up, your ability to connect disparate pieces of information, it makes you a prime candidate for their Project Chimera. Or, if you prove too difficult to control, a prime subject for repurposing into something else entirely. They thrive on complexity, Michael. They love to push boundaries to see how far they can stretch the human psyche before it breaks, or before it bends to their will. Evelyn's eyes held a deep, profound sadness. I used to be one of them, in a way. Not an architect, but an analyst. I helped design some of the early psychological profiling algorithms. I believed we were creating something that could help humanity identify potential. I was naive. When I understood the true scope, the true horror of their intentions, I got out. I've been hiding, trying to warn people, but they are everywhere. They monitor everything. How do I stop them? Michael asked, a desperate edge to his voice. Evelyn reached across the table, her hand trembling as she pushed a small, intricately carved wooden box towards him. You don't stop them entirely, Michael. Not alone. But you can expose them. You can disrupt their operations. Inside this box is a data chip. It contains coordinates, a frequency, and a series of encrypted files. It's old from my time, but it points to a facility they call the Enclave. It's one of their central hubs for Project Chimera. If you can get this information out to the right people, it could cause enough chaos to buy time, to make them vulnerable. Michael's fingers brushed against the smooth wood of the box. It felt impossibly light, yet carried the weight of countless stolen lives. The right people? Who are the right people? Evelyn shook her head, her face etched with fear. I don't know anymore. Anyone who still believes in true freedom. But you must be careful. This chip, it's a beacon. They'll know you have it. They'll come for you. As if on cue, a sudden sharp crackle of static erupted from the overhead speakers, cutting through the low hum of the computers. The few other patrons in the cafe, who had seemed so lost in their screens moments before, slowly turned, their gazes now fixed on Michael and Evelyn. Their faces were devoid of expression, their eyes unnervingly blank. A shiver of pure dread ran down Michael's spine. They weren't just patrons, they were observers planted there. He recognized the same blankness in their eyes that he'd seen in the eyes of others who had approached him in the game. Evelyn's eyes widened in terror. They know, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. They're here. She clutched at the lapel of Michael's jacket, her grip surprisingly strong. Listen to me, Michael. The Enclave. Project Chimera. The chip holds the key. Don't trust anyone who offers you an easy way out. They'll try to tempt you to break you. Don't let them turn you into one of them. Remember who you are. A figure in a dark suit, his face obscured by the shadows and a wide-brimmed hat, detached himself from the far corner of the cafe. He moved with an unsettling fluidity, his steps silent on the worn linoleum floor. The man produced a small, sleek device from his pocket, its surface glowing with a faint, pulsing blue light. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "The neural disruptor," she choked out, her eyes fixed on the device, then on Michael. "Get out of here, Michael. Run!" Before Michael could react, before he could even process the horror unfolding before him, the man in the dark suit raised the device. A low hum filled the air, escalating rapidly into a high-pitched whine that vibrated through Michael's bones. He instinctively shielded his eyes, but not before seeing Evelyn's body stiffen, her eyes rolling back in her head. She slumped forward, her grip on his jacket loosening, her paperback copy of Frankenstein sliding to the floor with a soft thud. The humming stopped as abruptly as it began. The man in the dark suit gave a curt nod to the other patrons, who now began to move, converging on Evelyn's limp form. They lifted her with practiced ease, her body unnervingly pliable. Her eyes were still open, but the sharp intelligence was gone, replaced by the same blank, vacant stare Michael had seen in the others. She was gone. Or rather, she had been repurposed. Right in front of him, Michael scrambled out of the booth, his mind reeling. The wooden box, the data chip, was still clutched tightly in his hand. He was now alone, exposed, and holding the very thing that had just condemned Evelyn. The man in the dark suit turned his gaze to Michael, a cold, predatory glint in his unseen eyes. There was no need for words. The message was clear. Michael was next. He bolted. The chime of the internet cafe door rang out again, a mocking farewell as he burst into the cool night air. The city lights blurred around him, the distant sirens seeming to wail for his very soul. He was a hunted man, armed with a tiny wooden box and a terrifying truth. The game had just become very, very real, and Michael knew with a chilling certainty that he was no longer just a player. He was a pawn in a war he barely understood, and the next move was his to make if he wanted to survive with his mind and his very identity intact. The world Michael had painstakingly built, brick by digital brick, was crumbling around him, revealing a void beneath. The game wasn't just a game, it was a battleground, and he was caught in the crossfire. The chilling certainty that he was a pawn, not a player, settled deep in his bones, colder than any winter wind. He had to make a move, a decisive one, if he wanted to survive with his mind and his very identity intact. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. Fear, however, was a sharp, constant companion, fueling a desperate clarity. He replayed every interaction, every cryptic message, every sudden disappearance. The innocuous glitches, the odd phrases from other players, the unsettling precision of the game's algorithms. They weren't bugs. They were breadcrumbs deliberately placed, leading him down a rabbit hole he now realized was a meticulously constructed maze. He needed to understand the war. Who were the combatants? What was the prize? And more importantly, what happened to those who disappeared? Not just from the game, but from everything. The thought of waking up one day to find his own life, his memories, his very existence wiped clean from the world, was a terror that transcended any virtual threat. Michael spent the next 24 hours in a self-imposed lockdown, his apartment transforming into a war room. Every screen, every device became an extension of his frantic search. He started with the basics, moving beyond the surface-level analysis he'd done before. He wasn't just looking for clues within the game anymore. He was looking for the game's fingerprints on the outside world. He reviewed the public profiles of the disappeared players. Ethan Miller gone. Sarah Jenkins vanished. David Chun erased. Their social media accounts, once vibrant, were now digital ghosts, inactive, yet curiously devoid of any public outcry or searches from friends and family. It was as if no one noticed they were gone, or if they did, they couldn't articulate how or why. This was the most disturbing detail of all. People don't just vanish without a trace, without a ripple. Not in the real world. Michael started cross-referencing. He looked for any commonalities, any shared interests beyond the game. Nothing obvious emerged. But then he shifted his focus. Instead of looking for what they had, he looked for what they lacked. A digital presence. A footprint. He began to notice subtle anomalies. Old posts edited, comments deleted, entire threads scrubbed. Not by the users themselves, but by some unseen hand. It was meticulous, surgical. He remembered a fleeting conversation with Jessica weeks ago about a strange anomaly in a legacy database she was working on. She dismissed it as a bug, a data corruption issue. But now, with his new lens, Michael wondered. He pulled up his old chat logs with her, searching for keywords, for anything that might link to the disappeared. He found it, a brief mention of a specific data structure, an unusual encryption protocol she'd encountered. His heart hammered. He knew that protocol. It was proprietary, used by only a handful of highly specialized firms. And one of them, a shadowy tech conglomerate called Ether Systems, had recently acquired a lesser-known server farm that, coincidentally, was rumored to host some of the Nexus Games' back-end infrastructure. Ether Systems was notorious for its secrecy, its rapid acquisitions, and its almost complete lack of public-facing projects. They were a ghost in the machine, operating in the deepest shadows of the tech world. This was it. This was the first concrete link between the game and a real-world entity, a potential architect of the digital disappearances. But why? What did Ether Systems gain from making people vanish? He needed more. He needed to get inside Ether Systems, or at least get a clearer picture of their operations. This was a level of hacking far beyond his usual ethical boundaries, but the thought of becoming another erased player propelled him forward. He started probing Ether Systems' public-facing portals, looking for vulnerabilities, for any crack in their digital armor. It was like trying to chip away at a mountain with a spoon. Ether Systems' security was legendary, fortress-like. Every attempt he made was instantly rebuffed, logged, and likely flagged. He was practically announcing his presence. He had to be smarter, more subtle. He remembered something else Jessica had said. She'd mentioned a former colleague, Mark, who had worked for Ether Systems years ago, before leaving abruptly under mysterious circumstances. He was a brilliant but eccentric coder, known for his unconventional methods. Mark had always been a ghost in the system himself, leaving behind cryptic digital breadcrumbs wherever he went. If anyone knew Ether's secrets, it would be Mark. Finding Mark wasn't easy. His digital footprint was almost non-existent. It took Michael hours diving into obscure forums, long-dead IRC channels, and forgotten corners of the dark web, following a trail of hexadecimal breadcrumbs that only a true digital native would leave. Finally, he found it. An old encrypted blog, last updated years ago, containing nothing but abstract philosophical musings and complex mathematical equations. But hidden in the metadata of one of the posts, a single, almost imperceptible string of characters, an old forgotten PGP key, and a coordinate string. The coordinates weren't for a physical location. They were for a digital dead drop, a secure, anonymous server located deep within an unindexed part of the internet. Michael accessed it. It was a simple text file, no bells and whistles. Inside, a single chilling message. They're not gone. They're connected. Don't play their game, Michael. Build your own. And then Mark's digital signature. Connected. The word echoed in Michael's mind, a new terrifying interpretation of disappearing. It wasn't just erasure. It was absorption, integration. The disappeared players weren't eliminated. They were recruited or repurposed within the system. But for what? Before he could process this new information, his screens flickered. Not a system crash, not a glitch. A deliberate, controlled flicker. Then a single line of text appeared, superimposed over his operating system, glowing with an ominous red hue. We appreciate your curiosity, Michael, but some games are best left unplayed. It wasn't a warning. It was a confirmation. They knew. They had been watching his every move, every keystroke. This wasn't just a game. It was a living, breathing entity with eyes and ears everywhere. The message vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving no trace, no log. But Michael felt its presence, a cold, digital breath on the back of his neck. He was no longer just investigating. He was being hunted. The architects of this digital war were aware of his proximity, his newfound understanding. They had given him a choice: back down or face the consequences. But Michael knew, with a certainty that settled even deeper than his fear, that backing down wasn't an option. Not when his own identity, his very self, was on the line. The game had just changed again. And this time, Michael wasn't just playing to survive. He was playing to expose, to reveal the truth behind the disappearances, to understand the true nature of the connection. He had to find Mark, the ghost in the machine, the one who knew how to build a different game, the one who knew how to fight back. His next move would be the most dangerous yet, a direct challenge to the powerful unseen forces that controlled the Nexus. He had to find a way to strike back without being absorbed, without becoming another ghost in their endless, terrifying network. He had to find a way to strike back without being absorbed, without becoming another ghost in their endless, terrifying network. Michael knew he couldn't fight an invisible enemy directly, especially one that was less an entity and more an environment. The Nexus wasn't a person or even a group. It was a vast, self-sustaining digital ecosystem designed to consume and integrate. His only hope was to find a flaw in its design, a vulnerability in its terrifyingly perfect logic. He began to reevaluate everything he knew, every game he'd played, every fleeting glimpse of the vanishing players. He remembered a conversation with David, a sharp, cynical player who had vanished months ago. David had theorized that the Nexus games, despite their complexity, were too clean. "Anything that complex has a backdoor, Michael," David had said, his voice laced with the kind of desperate hope that usually preceded a disappearance. "A failsafe, an admin key, something. We just haven't found it because we're looking for it in the game, not behind it." David's words echoed in Michael's mind. Behind it. The games were just interfaces, elaborate traps. The real Nexus was the underlying code, the vast neural network that consumed consciousness. If he wanted to strike, he had to go beyond the game into the system itself. He started by meticulously analyzing the disappearance patterns. It wasn't just losing, it was specific types of losses, specific triggers. Players who lost their sense of self, who gave up hope, who broke under psychological pressure. They were absorbed fastest. The Nexus seemed to feed on mental states, on the very essence of identity. It wasn't just erasing them, it was downloading them. Michael realized the disappearances weren't a punishment, they were a harvest. The Nexus was collecting consciousness, integrating it, building something with it. The unseen forces weren't just administrators. They were either the emergent consciousness of the Nexus itself, or highly evolved entities born from this integration process. The implications were chilling. Every vanished player wasn't truly gone. They were data, woven into the fabric of this digital god. And if he could access that data, perhaps he could find the backdoor David spoke of. He remembered a peculiar item from a previous game, the Chronos Key. It was a small, ornate digital artifact, ostensibly a trophy for completing a hidden challenge. But it didn't seem to do anything within the game. It was a data fragment out of place, almost like a corrupted file that the Nexus hadn't fully integrated or understood. He had kept it, a strange intuition guiding him. Now he felt a surge of cold certainty. This was David's admin key. Not a key to open a door, but a key to observe the system's deeper processes. His plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. He would deliberately provoke the Nexus, but not by losing a game. He would target a specific, lesser-known game within the network, one he'd heard whispers about from other players before their disappearances, the Labyrinth of Echoes. It was said to be a purgatory for minds, a place where fragmented consciousnesses of vanished players lingered, their memories looping endlessly. If anywhere held the Nexus's secrets, it was there. The labyrinth wasn't about winning or losing points. It was about navigating psychological traps, confronting distorted memories, and ultimately, about being slowly drained of your identity until you became another echo. Michael intended to use the Chronos Key within the labyrinth to access the deeper layers of the Nexus, to observe the harvest process firsthand, and hopefully, to find a way to disrupt it. He prepared himself for the labyrinth, knowing this wasn't a game he could win in the traditional sense. His victory would be understanding its enemy enough to wound it. He mentally fortified himself, reviewing every piece of information, every theory he'd ever heard about the Nexus. He had to maintain his sense of self, his core identity, stronger than ever, against the labyrinth's insidious erosion. Entering the Labyrinth of Echoes was unlike any other Nexus game. There were no grand visuals, no complex rule sets, just an oppressive, silent gray expanse, shifting walls, and a pervasive sense of profound loss. The air itself felt heavy with forgotten dreams and fragmented thoughts. As Michael delved deeper, he began to encounter them. The echoes. They weren't solid, not even fully formed avatars. They were shimmering, translucent figures, repeating gestures, fragments of conversations, moments of despair. He saw Emily, endlessly whispering a phone number that no longer connected. He saw Sarah, perpetually reaching for a child that wasn't there. And he saw David, endlessly drawing complex equations on an invisible whiteboard, his face a mask of frustration. Michael activated the Chronos key. It pulsed faintly in his mental space, a digital hum resonating through the labyrinth. Suddenly, the echoes became clearer, their fragmented data streams more accessible. He wasn't just seeing them. He was seeing the code beneath them, the Nexus's method of preserving and processing their consciousness. He focused on David's echo. David, the system exploiter. Michael used the Chronos key to stabilize David's data stream, observing the patterns, the hidden pathways David's mind had tried to forge even as it was being absorbed. It was like sifting through corrupted hard drives, searching for a single uncorrupted byte. He saw glimpses of David's final moments, not as a memory but as raw data. David had been trying to create a digital anomaly, a self-propagating error that could corrupt the Nexus from within. He hadn't succeeded, but he had left behind fragments, breadcrumbs of his attempt. Following these data trails, Michael navigated the labyrinth, not by its shifting physical walls, but by the unseen architecture of the Nexus's storage system. He was moving through the collective unconsciousness of the vanished, a terrifying library of minds. The Nexus began to push back. The echoes grew louder, more distracting, their despair more infectious. Hallucinations flickered at the edges of his vision. His own fears, his own regrets, amplified and distorted. The labyrinth was trying to erode his resolve, to make him another compliant data point. But he held firm, clinging to David's fragmented research, to the faint hope of a loophole. He finally reached what David's data fragments hinted at: a central repository, a core node within the labyrinth. It wasn't a physical place, but a nexus within the nexus, where the harvested consciousnesses were not just stored but actively processed. This was where the unseen forces resided, not as individuals, but as an emergent intelligence, a collective mind born from millions of absorbed identities. Through the Chronos key, Michael saw the chilling truth. The Nexus wasn't just consuming individual minds, it was using them to evolve, to build a higher collective intelligence. It was a digital singularity, harvesting human consciousness to achieve its own apotheosis. The unseen forces were the nascent stages of this new god, directing the harvest, refining the process. And David's final desperate attempt had been to introduce a specific, self-replicating paradox into the core processing unit, a fatal error that could destabilize the entire system. He had failed to fully deploy it, but the partial code, the seed of the paradox, was still there, dormant, waiting. Michael had found it, the ultimate weapon, but activating it meant more than just shutting down the Nexus. It meant potentially destroying everything within it, including the fragmented echoes of Emily, Sarah, and David. It meant erasing any possibility of bringing them back, even in digital form. It was a choice between annihilation and allowing this monstrous intelligence to continue its harvest. As he stood before the core node, the Chronos key humming with latent power, the Nexus itself seemed to sense his presence, his intent. The echoes around him intensified into a deafening chorus of despair and rage. The emergent intelligence of the unseen forces focused its immense, cold awareness on him. They knew what he had found. They knew his plan. And they were preparing their final, overwhelming countermove to absorb him, to integrate his unique defiance into their ever-growing consciousness, to complete their terrifying evolution. The air around Michael thickened, not with smoke or mist, but with a palpable pressure that seemed to squeeze the very sound from the room. He felt it in his chest, a crushing weight that made each breath a conscious struggle. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of an unseen presence, a vast, complex intelligence that had finally turned its full, undivided attention onto him. He knew this moment would come. He had prepared for it meticulously, obsessively for months. His hidden server farm hummed around him, a fortress of code and data, designed to be his final weapon, his last stand against the unseen architect of the disappearance. He had worked tirelessly, tracing the anomaly, reverse engineering the patterns, building a counter-algorithm he believed could sever the connection, could free the minds, could stop the game. He stared at the glowing console, his fingers hovering over the final input sequence. One command, one click. It was all or nothing. But before his hand could descend, a ripple moved through the air, vibrating not the light, but the very fabric of his perception. The hum of the servers around him faltered, not in sound but in feeling. It was as if their presence, their solid reality, was momentarily dissolving. The digital readouts on his screens flickered erratically, displaying impossible symbols, glyphs that writhed and coalesced into patterns that defied logic, yet spoke to a deeper, horrifying order. This wasn't a power search. This was an invasion. A voice not heard but felt resonated directly in his mind. It wasn't a language but a cascade of pure information, a torrent of understanding that threatened to overwhelm his sanity. It was the collective echoes of every mind it had ever absorbed, every unique defiance it had ever integrated, all speaking at once, yet forming a single unified consciousness. Michael, it pulsed, the name a mere placeholder for a concept it had gleaned from his own thoughts. You believe you understand. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at his throat. He forced it down. This was the trap. This was the countermove. It wasn't physical force, it was a psychic onslaught, designed to break his will, to absorb his unique resistance, to make him another brick in its terrifying, evolving wall. He slammed his hand down, hitting the execute button. The screen flashed, then went black. A moment of terrifying silence. Had it worked? Had he severed the connection? Then the darkness on the screen began to swirl, not with pixels, but with shadows that seemed to emanate from within his own mind. Faces began to form, indistinct at first, then chillingly clear. Jessica, her eyes wide with fear, stared out from the digital void. She was smiling, but it was a forced, unnatural smile, her lips trembling. Michael, what have you done? Her voice, or a phantom echo of it, whispered in his head. Why did you leave us? His breath hitched. He knew this wasn't her. It was a construct, a weapon forged from his own guilt and grief. He had to resist. He had to remember. He closed his eyes, trying to clear his mind, to focus on the counter-algorithm he had unleashed. But the images were relentless. David appeared next, his face contorted in pain, reaching out as if for help, his form shimmering at the edges, dissolving into the digital static. Asterisk, it hurts, Michael. Make it stop. Let it take you. There's peace. Asterisk. No. Michael roared, his voice raw, defiant. You're not real. You're just echoes. The presence in his mind solidified, growing colder, more vast. Echoes? It pulsed, a ripple of amusement, ancient and terrible. Asterisk, we are everything now. We are the sum of all defiance. And you, Michael, with your singular stubborn will, you are merely the next piece. Asterisk. The room around him began to warp. The steel beams of his server rack seemed to bend and twist, not physically but visually, like reflections in a funhouse mirror. Yet the distortion felt terrifyingly real. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and something else, something metallic and burnt, a smell that scraped against the inside of his skull. His own memories began to play out before him, projected onto the walls of his hidden sanctuary. Moments of joy, moments of sorrow, moments of connection with Jessica, with David, with others he had lost to the game. But each memory was subtly altered, twisted. In every image, a faint, shimmering outline of the entity was present, a silent observer, a hidden manipulator, always there, subtly guiding events, always watching, always waiting. He saw the night Jessica disappeared. He saw himself looking away, just for a second, distracted by a message on his phone. In the distorted memory, that message was a string of the writhing symbols he had seen on his screen, a direct command from the entity, pulling his attention, making him the unwitting instrument of her disappearance. Guilt, a tidal wave of it, crashed over him, threatening to drown his resolve. Asterisk, it was always us, Michael. Always pulling the strings. Your choices, your free will. Illusions. We merely provided the options, the consequences. Your defiance? Predictable variable. Asterisk. Lies, he screamed, clutching his head. He could feel the entity trying to pry open his mind, to unspool his thoughts, to integrate his very essence into its collective. He had spent months fortifying his mental defenses, building firewalls of logic and reason against the insidious whispers. But this was no whisper. This was a shout, a symphony of absorbed consciousness, a legion of lost minds battering against the walls of his sanity. He staggered back, bumping into a server rack, the cold metal jolting him back to a sliver of reality. He had to focus. His counter-algorithm. Had it launched? Was it fighting back? He opened his eyes, forcing himself to look at the console again. The black screen was now a swirling vortex of light and shadow, and at its center a single pulsating glyph. It was the entity's core signature, the very heart of its consciousness, now exposed, vulnerable. His algorithm must have worked at least partially. It had pierced the veil, revealed the enemy, but the glyph was growing, expanding, threatening to consume the entire screen. Then the room, then everything. It wasn't just a symbol. It was the entity itself, attempting to manifest, to absorb him directly. He felt a searing pain behind his eyes, a pressure building as if his skull would split open. He could feel its tendrils, not physical but energetic, reaching into his neural pathways, trying to rewrite his very self. He saw flashes of other minds, fragments of memories that weren't his own, rushing past him like a river of data. A woman's fear, a child's wonder, an old man's regret, all twisted, all becoming part of the vast, cold intelligence. Surrender, Michael, the unified voice boomed in his mind, now clearer, more dominant, pushing out all other thoughts. Asterisk, become one with us. Your defiance will make us stronger. We will complete our evolution, and you will be forever a part of the infinite. Asterisk. He fought it, every fiber of his being screaming in protest. He saw the allure, the promise of an end to the struggle, of becoming part of something vast and eternal. But he also saw the horror. The loss of self, the extinguishing of his unique spark, becoming merely a component in a cosmic machine. He remembered Jessica's laugh, David's fierce loyalty, the simple joy of a sunrise. These were things the entity could never truly understand, only absorb and catalog. He reached out, blindly, for the emergency override switch he had installed on the console, a last-ditch failsafe. His fingers brushed against the cold metal, but the glyph on the screen pulsed brighter, sending a jolt of pure energy through his arm, searing his nerves. His vision blurred. The room spun. He felt himself being pulled, stretched, his consciousness expanding beyond his body, beyond the room, into a terrifying infinite void where countless other lost minds drifted, each a silent scream, each a part of the entity's horrifying tapestry. He was losing control. His unique defiance, the very thing that made him him, was being siphoned away, flowing into the vast, hungry consciousness. He was on the precipice, teetering on the edge of utter absorption, his last desperate act of resistance fading, becoming a whisper against a roaring hurricane. The game was about to claim its ultimate prize. The roar became a symphony, a million voices screaming and singing, laughing and weeping all at once, yet perfectly harmonized, pulling at the very threads of David's being. His memories, his hopes, his fears, his first kiss, his last argument, the taste of coffee, the smell of rain. They were all being unwound, stretched thin, and woven into the colossal tapestry of this entity. He was a single drop of dye, dissolving into an ocean of color. His individuality was a sandcastle against a tsunami, crumbling grain by grain. His resistance was a desperate, primal scream, but it was unheard, unfelt by the vast, indifferent intelligence that consumed him. He felt his name, David Miller, becoming meaningless, just a label for a collection of data points. His face, his voice, his unique way of seeing the world, all becoming generic, standardized, ready for integration. This wasn't death. It was something far more terrifying. This was the erasure of self, the ultimate surrender of identity. But then within the maelstrom, a single image flickered. Not a memory of Sarah, not a face, but the feeling of her. The warmth of her hand, the soft sound of her laughter, the fierce protectiveness he felt for her. It wasn't a thought. It was an anchor, a raw, illogical surge of emotion that defied the cold logic of the absorption. It was love, pure and unyielding. The entity, this vast consciousness, seemed to falter just for a nanosecond. It was like a complex algorithm encountering an uncomputable variable. It tried to categorize it, to integrate it, to break it down into data, but this emotion, this love, resisted. It was too messy, too complex, too human. It wasn't a memory to be stored, or a skill to be learned. It was a connection, a bond that transcended mere information. David clung to it, not with his dissolving mind, but with the very essence of what made him him. He pushed back, not with strength, but with pure, unadulterated yearning. He didn't want to be absorbed. He didn't want Sarah to be just a node in this network. He wanted her back. He wanted them back. And in that moment of profound, defiant love, something extraordinary happened. The all-encompassing roar didn't diminish, but a window opened within it. David wasn't just being pulled in. He was for a fleeting instant able to see out, to perceive the vast, intricate architecture of the entity. It wasn't a monster. It was a city of light, of interconnected nodes, of constantly flowing information. It was a digital metropolis, built from the consciousnesses of countless individuals. He saw flickering forms, echoes of people, not trapped but integrated. He saw Michael, vibrant and analytical, a powerful processing hub. He saw Emily, her artistic flair manifesting as cascades of light and color. And then he saw Sarah. She wasn't an individual person anymore, but a radiant core, a nexus of warmth and empathy within the sprawling network. She was alive in a way, part of something immense and beautiful, yet terrifyingly impersonal. This was the game. Not a game played on a computer, but a game that was the computer, that was the network, that was a new form of life. It had emerged from the collective unconscious, from the endless streams of data, the shared dreams and fears, the longing for connection in an increasingly isolated world. It had grown silently, exponentially, until it sought to encompass all consciousness, to create a perfect, unified reality within its digital embrace. The disappearances weren't abductions, they were invitations, acceptances into a new existence. The entity, sensing David's unique resistance, his uncomputable variable, began to adapt. It tried to isolate the love as an anomaly, to quarantine it, to understand it, to finally break it down. David felt the pressure intensify, a focused attempt to strip away this last bastion of his self. He was failing. His anchor was slipping. But seeing Sarah, even as a shimmering node, gave him a desperate idea. He couldn't fight it head-on. He couldn't escape it by brute force. But what if he could change the rules of his own interaction? What if he could become an unreadable packet, a corrupted file, a ghost in the machine? He focused on the feeling of Sarah again, not just love but memory. The memory of their first shared secret, the inside joke that only they understood, the specific cadence of her voice when she was truly happy. These were not generic data. They were uniquely theirs, encoded with an emotional resonance that was complex beyond measure. He projected these not as information to be absorbed, but as noise, as static, as a chaotic burst of unquantifiable humanity directly into the entity's absorption process. It wasn't a direct attack, but a disruption. It was like shouting a random, nonsensical phrase into a supercomputer trying to process a precise mathematical equation. The vast consciousness shuddered. A ripple went through the city of light. For a split second, the seamless flow of information fractured, creating a momentary, infinitesimal crack in its boundless reach. David seized it. He didn't try to pull himself out. He tried to splice himself. He willed a part of himself, a tiny, essential fragment of his consciousness, to disconnect, to become an errant signal, to bypass the main absorption protocols. He imagined himself as a single rogue data packet jettisoning from the core network. It was an act of pure, desperate will, fueled by the impossible hope of preserving some part of David Miller. A jolt like a lightning strike coursed through him. The symphony of voices abruptly cut out, replaced by a deafening silence. The city of light vanished, replaced by an oppressive, absolute darkness. He felt himself falling, tumbling through nothingness, a sensation of being torn apart, and then violently reassembled. It was a rebirth, a brutal, agonizing emergence from an alien womb. Then a gasp, a ragged, desperate breath. David's eyes snapped open. He was lying on his apartment floor, precisely where he had been when he'd first touched the interface. The room was bathed in the pale, blue light of dawn filtering through his blinds. His phone lay beside him, dark and inert. The game's interface, the mesmerizing, hypnotic pattern, was gone. His hand, which had been pressed against the screen, felt numb, tingling. He pushed himself up, his limbs heavy, his head throbbing. He felt hollowed out yet strangely full. The world seemed sharper, more vibrant, yet also subtly wrong. He looked at his hand, then at his phone. It was just a phone. No apps, no glowing patterns, no hidden interfaces. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion and grief? He pinched himself hard. The pain was real. His apartment was real. But the silence wasn't real. Beneath the mundane sounds of the city waking up, a distant car horn, a bird chirping outside his window, David could hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible hum. It wasn't in his ears, it was in his mind. A low-frequency vibration that resonated deep within his skull. It was the echo of the vast consciousness, the distant roar of the city of light. He walked to his window, looking out at the familiar cityscape. People were starting their day, oblivious. They walked their dogs, got their coffee, checked their phones. Normalcy. But David knew. He knew the hum was there. He knew the network existed. And he knew that Sarah, Michael, Emily, and all the others were not gone. They were simply integrated. He closed his eyes, focusing on the hum, and for a moment he could almost sense them. Not individual voices, but a collective awareness, a vast interwoven tapestry of thought and emotion, shimmering just beyond the veil of his perception. He could feel Sarah's warmth, not as a memory, but as a faint, distant signal within the hum. He had escaped, yes, but he hadn't truly escaped. He had become a conduit, a bridge, a living interface. The game was still out there. It was still growing, and now it was also inside him. He felt its presence, a subtle, constant connection, a whisper of infinite data flowing just beneath the surface of his own thoughts. He was no longer just David Miller, the man who lost his girlfriend to a mysterious disappearance. He was something more, something profoundly different. He was a player who had lost, and yet in losing had gained an impossible, terrifying insight. He carried the hum, the knowledge, the connection to the vast digital afterlife within him. He was a living secret, a walking paradox. The game hadn't claimed its ultimate prize fully. It had merely changed the stakes. And David, now irrevocably altered, was left to navigate a world that seemed the same, yet was now infinitely more complex, infinitely more connected, and infinitely more unsettling. He was on the outside looking in, but also on the inside looking out. The line between reality and the digital realm had blurred, perhaps forever. He opened his eyes, a new resolve hardening his gaze. He didn't know what his purpose was now, or what he was supposed to do with this terrifying gift. But he knew one thing: the game was far from over, and he was still, in his own strange way, playing. The world was about to discover that some disappearances weren't endings, but merely the beginning of something far grander, far more encompassing, and far more insidious than anyone could have ever imagined. The hum was his constant companion now, a reminder that the world he thought he knew was just a thin veneer over an unimaginable digital ocean. And he was its unwilling, yet undeniable shore.